Thanks, Phil, and thanks to Sustainability New Zealand for supporting us in this activity today. And welcome everybody. Thanks very much for coming along. As Phil's noted, I'm the Trade Commissioner for the UK and Ireland. I'm based in London. Been up there about a year, but prior to moving to London, I was involved in the food and beverage sector here in Auckland. Prior to that, 4.5 years in the Middle East and then in Japan. So I've been doing what I do for some time, but coming into the London office, it was very clear that we had an agenda which we really did need to push through as a matter of urgency, both in support of the capability of New Zealand businesses operating in the UK, but with a view to taking that to a much broader audience. We started our work around the sustainability agenda in a reactive place. It was in response to what was dubbed the Food Miles crisis. We were gathering market intelligence to support New Zealand Inc. To defend New Zealand's position, particularly in the food and beverage industry, against some challenges which were being put up by UK retail. And we built some key stakeholder relationships in the process of doing that and gathering that market intelligence. And it became clear from the conversations that we were having at the time that the underlying issues that led to the Food Miles discussion and the demand from consumers and therefore the retailers for more information on what we're consuming and from where and how it's produced and what impact it has on the much broader environment was not going to go away. And so we took over the last 18 months, have spent time developing practical hands-on content, particularly for the UK businesses based the New Zealand businesses based in the UK, and have contracted in some external providers from the UK and thought leaders to support us in that. We've run 3 seminars over the last 12 months. The first around the general business case and context in the UK for sustainable business development. The second, we're seeking some specific insights into supermarket retail, and the reason being that was the area where we started this work, but also because from a merchandise trade perspective, food and beverage is a key export into the UK from New Zealand. And then the third piece was with a much broader view in mind, and that was around communications. And as Phil's mentioned, Gabrielle, my colleague from London, will be touching in on that. So today's presentation is in 3 parts. I'll do the bit on or condense down what was a day's worth of content on the business case and context, and then a further day's worth of content on the UK retail environment. We've then got the pleasure of Nick Main to speak to you and take that UK conversation into a global context. Nick moves in some very interesting circles and C-suites of some major businesses globally in this discussion, and so he's going to share some anecdote and insight from that, and then Gabrielle will cover off the communications. I just note that we'll, if we may, we'll hold questions till the end. There's a reasonable amount of content that we're going to go through, so please do note down any questions that you have. We also do have the full presentations along with some abbreviated speaking notes on USBs outside. We haven't printed anything off for you. That's not particularly sustainable, but so that's available for those that do want to pick it up on the way out. And if we do run out for whatever reason, do leave your business card and we can organise to get one of those to you. So moving into the first part around the context and the business case, this is a slide that I put up for our UK audiences. It's one that resonates particularly well for them. They are typically on this receiving end of the big man. And I use Jonah here as a metaphor for the sustainability issue. If you're looking at the issue from this angle, there's going to be 2 things that are going to happen to you. The first thing that's going to happen to you is, well, one of 2 is that he's going to sidestep you and you're going to spend the rest of the day chasing this guy down. The other thing that might happen to you is that you'll get smashed and run over completely, end up very, very bruised, and that's not a good place to be. And all the work that we've been doing with New Zealand business is about getting them from a reactive into a proactive place, about getting on board with the issue and moving in the same direction. Sorry, this picture's a bit old, that's in the Sevens career. but running in the same direction, and that requires changing the perspective that you take on this discussion. The operating environment for business is changing. We should all be aware of that. We have an economic reality which means that capital is more constrained. There's rising populations that are demanding more. Pressure on natural resources is increasing, and as a result, input costs are rising. Business as usual, business in the consumption-only frame of mind is no longer an option, and smart businesses, and the ones that we're working with and looking at in the UK certainly, are managing the risks in their supply chain, managing the risks of these constraints, looking to do things better. And we encourage New Zealand business to be in the same mindset about the longer term view and looking at the sustainable business model. Many of you will have seen this sort of diagram before. It's the sort of the representation of the triple bottom line, balancing the financial considerations with those of the environment and broader society. The sweet spot, the point of convergence in the middle, is where ideally we'd like to be. The reality is, and we understand this, is that particularly in the current environment, many people are looking to survive day to day, week to week, year to year, and so that financials place, and we're probably going to be veering more towards the top end of that sphere. But the more that we can be moving down into here, the better. And it's a case of being aware and understanding that we have to take into consideration the societal and environmental factors that will enable us to be better prepared to respond to the markets as they move, and they are moving on this now. So in terms of finding the balance, the questions that we need to ask ourselves in every business discussion: first of all, is it profitable? Is it going to continue our business? We can't do so. We can't stay in business if we're not making money out of it. But we then need to ask ourselves, is there value for our customers in what we're doing? Are we safeguarding the people that work for us, that we work with, in the broader society as well? How does this benefit our community, this product or service? Who are the other stakeholders involved in this? Thinking beyond our own business. And what are we doing about the environment? What are the impacts on the environment of this particular product or service? And are we making efficient uses of all the resources that we've got? If we ask ourselves how, in every decision we make, how it's going to impact our bottom line, our customers, our operating environment, our human capital, then there will be no surprises when those questions are asked of us by our external customers. If we've had that internal conversation first, then that is putting us in a much better position. So this is not about saving the planet or wearing a hair shirt. It's about recognising the long-term strategic benefit of our business and managing the risks to us of not being aware of the situation. If we get this right, we have a licence to grow. We'll be able to attract and retain top talent. This is certainly what we're seeing with the UK businesses, the large multinationals who are getting in the best people, particularly with the I don't know what we're up to now, Gen Z probably, those that will not stay in a job that they're not comfortable with, that doesn't match their own ethics, their own values. So we'll be able to attract and retain the top talent, be able to reduce our costs, and thereby increase our profits. It's about doing more with less. It's about doing better with what we've got. We'll be able to reduce our risks in our supply chain by understanding more about what it requires. And Phil's touched on the fact that we need to be close to our customers. We need to understand what it is that's driving them. And in turn, we'll be able to build value in our brands, building positive public perceptions and enhance the value that our customers see in working with us and our products and our services. And we can also positively influence and see an evolution in the types of businesses that we're doing. And I'd use as an example here Marks and Spencer's. Many of you will probably have heard this particular example, their Plan A, which outlines what originally outlined 100 across-the-board sustainability issues that they wanted to address. They came out in public with that. talk to their customers about the fact this is what we want to do in order to make our business better. 2007 they launched that program with a 100-point commitment and a time frame by which they were going to get there. They didn't know how they were going to get there in many instances and are still developing the answers. But in 2007 they invested, and they called it an investment rather than a cost, £200 million in that program. At the end of the first year they were cost neutral in running that program, and at the end of year 3 they were £20 million in profit. Where did that profit come from? It's self-reported admittedly, but where did that profit come from? It came from they're using their resources more efficiently within their business. It came from them, the brand value that they built up and the customer loyalty that resulted. It came from some pricing areas in terms of change to the types of business that they were doing. Because there was value ascribed to their brand in an environmental and societal context, they were able to move into product and service areas that they hadn't looked at before and able to make money off them. An example of this is insulation. This is quite a big step for a business that's involved primarily in food and beverage and clothing. So a couple of quotes, which as I get myself a glass of water, it just takes that into a much broader global context. Nick will touch on this a little bit later on. He's got some great quotes too. But it's about walking the talk. And then if you've got that position, then people will follow you. So we, in the course of the last 18 months, we've spent a lot of time talking and working with an organisation called IGD, which is the Institute of Grocery Distributors. I'd point out at this point that I'm going to talk about supermarket retail in the UK. Please consider this as a proxy or a case study, if you like, for the types of discussions that are happening much more broadly in the UK and in fact globally. As I said, we're working with supermarkets because that's a primary interest area for New Zealand, but you can change out Marks and Spencer's with British Telecom, you can change out Tesco's with the NHS. These organisations are having these same sorts of conversations, phrased in different ways, but looking at the same underlying issues. And so every business that comes through the front door of New Zealand House that we're working with, we're having these discussions with. We'd like to be having these discussions with them a lot earlier, before they leave New Zealand, before they arrive in the UK, and that's partly what this is all about. So to understand what issues might affect the way that New Zealand was doing business, we had to understand what was driving market demands. And the Institute of Grocery Distributors, which is effectively the industry good body for grocery manufacturers and the retailers, and its reach goes far beyond the United Kingdom. It's into Europe and obviously into the supply chains that come into that. And I encourage you to check out their website, have a look at their information. They do have a subscription service which we're party to, which has some very interesting market intelligence for those of you who are involved in this particular space. But we asked them, what are the core issues of concern for UK business and consumers? Why are these issues of interest? How are these issues driving sustainability strategies at a company level? And how might these issues bleed across markets? We looked to the UK, as I mentioned, as a window to the future. These discussions that we have been having for the last 5 years are definitely bleeding across markets. We've started to see some of the things that were happening in the UK, particularly around fisheries, stocking and the like, that were taking place in the UK back in about 4 years ago. We've seen pop up recently in Australia. And across into Canada as well. And so, whilst they're not necessarily influenced, these, we're in a much more condensed information environment now. News travels, trends move across markets very quickly. The reality is that the UK, and I'll come back to the UK retailers, these large retailers are moving or taking global positions now. particularly Tesco's, you'll see is now active through Asia. And the reputational risk for them of not adhering to the standards that they hold at home in their offshore markets is significant when those consumers in China can communicate very easily back with those in the UK, and then the various interest groups will very, very quickly out any non-aligned behaviour. So this is, if you like, a new normal. It really should be viewed as a global